Come, my children, enter the cosmic wonderland of the liquid Milano. I guess it works, right? You can hear me well enough, I hope. Okay. Testing, 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 testing. Good? Too loud? Uh-oh. I am just like a disaster waiting to happen. Oh, okay, listen up. Gail Getzman-Stolpa has an offer for everybody. We try to do what we can for you people who join us in our group, and Gail has brought us some.
Anyway, if you want one, I'm just pass it around or talk to the door, let them take you on. If you sign up your name and your phone number, and when they're registered, it's everything. So if you no, I'm thinking of moving. I figure if we don't read them now.
Right.
And Dick Gallion, if anybody didn't see my letter to the editor for Dick Gallion, they want to take one of those. Well, anyway, I don't have
Hey, welcome to the chaos. Okay, well, thank you all for coming today. It's a beautiful day, except for maybe like 1 minute of just sheer terror-inducing softball-sized hail, but they kept that to a minimum. Let's just, I've got some downtowny kind of stories today and some pictures to go with them. And I'm going to be starting off with something called the Erpelding block. Have any of you ever heard of the Erpelding block? Oh. It is? Oh, well, damn, I'm always learning something new. I mean, I never knew it was called the Erpelding block until I found out that I was going to be involved with the Heritage Preservation Commission open house on May 31st, Saturday, May 31st, at the old Erpelding building, 102 Walnut. Heritage Preservation Commission will be holding an open house, and they have brought in some slick talking drip from Racine, Wisconsin to run his pie hole during the program. And so I thought, what better way to reward you for coming in here this afternoon? I'm going to drop it on you. The 4th of July, 1982. The 4th of July, 1862 was not widely celebrated in this brand new state of Minnesota, or anywhere else for that matter. The Civil War was in its second year with no end in sight, and the scrappy frontier river town of Winona saw a chance to make a big splash. I just love saying the words frontier and Winona together. I mean, this is a city where they roll the sidewalks up at 5 p.m., and I moved here knowing that, and I'm happy I did. But Frontier Winona was really a fantastic place. Winona was going to throw a party this 4th of July, 1862. It became the talk of the river towns, though still in the Union. The Winona firemen and their firewives had invited the La Crosse firemen and their firewives to come on up on the steamboat Frank Steele along with a marching band. Boats came to Winona from far away as St. Paul and Prairie du Chien to celebrate the glorious 4th. The steamboat Frank Steele was met at the levee with a grand fanfare by a crowd of leading Winonas. There were parades, speeches, dinners, and there was even a dance. Strictly speaking, it was kind of the firefighters' gig, but the whole town partied along. Everybody had a great time. The food was great. The music was great. The fireworks were great. And a little bit after 10 or so, people went home. And then, about 1 o'clock in the morning of July 5th, 1862, some stupid with a flare gun, well, not really, but some idiot started a fire out back of what's now the mainstream pawn shop out at 2nd and 3rd and Lafayette. And it wound up taking out 90% of downtown Winona. And only... Oh, there's the map. Grab this sucker. Well, we're going to hope for the best. Okay, here we go. We're now in downtown Winona, 1895, and we're talking about number 10, the Erpelding block, which is at the corner of Walnut and 2nd Street. The area taken out by the fire was probably going to be the blocks with number 3, Blind Andrew's Newsstand, number 4, the Slade block, block number 6, Trier's block number 5, the Morgan block, number 8, all burned down. The damage was $500,000, which translates to modern dollars at about $19 million. 18% was insured. 18 cents on the dollar. Not for the last time, Winona was on the ropes. And just like all of the other times, Winona came back swinging. The wooden buildings burned down, and Winona was built back in brick. But before I get into that, I want to tell you just a couple of things about what is a block. What we see here is Block 13 of the original plat of Winona. A block in this context is basically some land surrounded by streets. This is a block, okay? And up in the upper right-hand corner of the 1889 Sanborn fire map, you see Erpelding block. And when I saw Erpelding block, I thought to myself, what in the heck is the Erpelding block? Oh boy, did I find out. But the Erpelding block was one of the very first blocks built after the fire. Another definition of a block is a building. A building 2 stories tall, maybe usually brick, usually imposing, stoutly built. It was, in many respects, the 19th century equivalent of a strip mall. What you see here is, I don't know if you can pick it up. Oh, wait. This is even better. This is the almighty Trier block. Earlier this week, I was sitting in my armchair feeling the undertow. I don't know. Ever since I turned 63, apparently, I like to just sit in my armchair and not do anything. I mean, and I don't expect it to get any better. But I got a text from Merle. It just said, what do you know about the Trier block? Thanks. Jeez. I've been doing this since I came here. And I'm going to have to blast my ass out of my chair and see. And that's what I did. I blasted my ass out of my chair. And down the rabbit hole I go. Merle will tell you about the Trier block. It was put together by a dude whose name was General Abram Trier. I found this out just last night. And I thought, well, he's a Civil War general. Well, everybody's a Civil War general. You were probably a Civil War general and didn't even know it. He was a Jewish guy from Alsace-Lorraine. And he was Jewish. He was He lived in a little hovel, and all he did was trade real estate, and he built the Trier block. It was the only block saved from the fire of 1862. The fire was stopped on Main Street, thank God. There's the Trier block for you, and a little bit of Norton and Mitchell selling timberlands along the Winona and St. Peter back in 1864. Sometimes blocks can be very beautiful. And as an example of a beautiful block, I thought I'd show you the Morgan block because you knew I would. This is the original, and this is me tricking it up with Midjourney a little bit. You know, the way it should have looked this coming Christmas with cars and all of that. But the post office block is still pretty sharp. The Oddfellows block is a favorite of mine, Jovi Rocky Jewelry now. And the Choate block, it was called the Choate block. These are all still here. But I'm going to tell you about the Erpelding block, which is now known as 102 Walnut, which is now known as Nosh. Peter Erpelding was a Luxembourger. He and his wife, Lena, immigrated to the U.S. in 1845 or some other year, and basically wound up around Rolling Stone. I looked at the 1870 census just for poops and grins. I got that. Well, I got a surprise. I didn't put it in there. Peter Erpelding had $30,000 in capital in 1870. That's $750,000 on top of his $4,000 farm, which was a very fine farm back in 1870. This guy had money, and he decided to put up just for an investment, he put up this business block. He never lived in it. He never operated a business in it. He just rented it out until he sold it to. Anybody want to guess who he sold it to? Burl, you want to guess who he sold it to? Everybody's favorite predatory capitalist. Yeah, it was Verrazano Simpson, all right. Verrazano Simpson was Winona's iconic capitalist ex-mayor and wife whipper. His wife was sassing him back in 1871. She was down there on Jefferson Street with their daughter giving him crap, and Verrazano whipped out his bullwhip and whap! Right out there on Lafayette Street. But fear not, folks, fear not, dear listeners. His wife, Ann Monahan Simpson, took his rear end to the cleaners. He had to sell off property. She took him to the cleaners so bad. So the story does have a happy ending. But we have here now, and it's not really that fancy of a building. It has this big, beautiful mansard roof. And if you can, let's see, this is the 1885 Sanborn fire map. You see up where it's labeled Erpelding Block on the corner of Walnut and 2nd Street, you can see the little buildings being built alongside it, the little bays moving in. I'm still trying to work this stuff out, folks, but one of them is the Weibel's Hotel. Peter Weibel built a little hotel there, and he lived to be 95 years old, and he was walking the streets giving good advice to people well into his 90s. I mean, and Michael, as you know, I mean, there is like this endless backlog of stuff that was done and happened in this building. It's just unreal. But here's a look down the block. I give it here. There are hardly any pictures of the Erpelding block. There are only really 3 of them that I know of. And all the way down, the second mansard roof, all the way back down there is the Erpelding block. I just thought that you might like to take a look down East 2nd Street as it used to be. Folks, this block was Prostitute Central. You can forget Queenie Levac. You can forget West 2nd Street. I mean, yeah, there were blocks and blocks. It was spread out. But that block right there, holy crap. Erie block, holy crap. And don't even get me started about pieces of the past where Edith Shackle did her thing. I'm going to shut up. Shut up now. Oh, the place of guilt. 1873. When the clothing and effects of the late Philander Baldwin of Homer were examined, a key was found under the rain. They were shacking up in the Erpelding block. I'm still trying to figure out what the Baldwin tragedy was all about. The Erpelding block is better known probably as the A.M. Raymer Candy Company, also known as Bowling Manufacturing. It's been so many things over the years. I'll just close this with two things. As one, come and see me talk about this junk on May 31st at 11 a.m. We will have indoor tours and outdoor tours and blather and awards and all of that stuff. But come and see the story of a building that's still doing its job. This building was built just as an investment by some dude, some rich farmer, back in 1871. And it's freaking amazing how it's got Nosh, it's got Edward Jones, it's got the Fish and Wildlife Administration. They've just got all these diverse people putting it to all these uses. I mean, this town is just freaking amazing. And 102 Walnut is an example of that. How would you like a job making candy? One more thing. Raymer's left Winona, Minnesota in 1920. They moved up to St. Paul. And they still sold their famous Gate City chocolates, named after the Gate City of Minnesota. Anybody here know the Gate City of Minnesota? Maryland. Exactly. I mean, Gate City chocolates made in St. Paul, Minnesota. Right. Okay, this is what Peter Shortridge and Mike Gostomski started out with. It didn't look like it had any prospects, but oh my God, you'll see what bones that building has if you come on by and see us. All right, I'm going to stop there at the downtown Winona map, and I'm going to shut up now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Testing. Can you hear me? All right. I think there's still Erpeldings around. I went to school with a Michael Erpelding out by Rolling Stone, and I would be curious if the farm that was Peter Erpelding's is still in the family. Did they? This time of year is special in Winona. This time of year meant everything to me when I was a little kid. School was done. That means I could head out on my bicycle, and I could head down to the lake, and I could play ball. I could play baseball. And all the legends were down there. There was Max Moloch and Earl Bruger and John Nett, Booby Hargensheimer. That was my life. It brought juice. By spring of the year, I was tired of school. I was done. And summers have always been one of the most special times to be alive and active in this town. I've got a couple interesting stories, I think, tonight. Sometimes I go out walking. I go out walking through town. I go walk out through the community. One of my favorite places to go to is the Winona Public Library, especially the front stoop. And I like running out on that front stoop about 3 o'clock in the morning. The town is quiet. It hasn't woke up yet. It slowly wakes up. And at that time, I find history. I find the past. I find the people of my past. So here's the story. I was walking down by the library. I like that part of town. I used to park over by the college amongst the shaded trees of thoughts. I felt the warmth of awakening after a long winter nap. Trees are always welcoming to those of us who contemplate where we've been. I could hear the church bells ringing, though I couldn't tell you which church bells they were that I was hearing. It doesn't matter, and it felt good to be walking amongst the big churches that talked of better ways, and I started feeling yesterday and remembering old Winona. I had myself a smoke and started dancing with the wind as I let those work blues go. I tried crossing Broadway, which seems to have become a highway, as people hurriedly make it to the other side of town. I'm old enough to know that the sun that hits you in the eye on that road can blind you, and Winona's history is littered with people who paid the price for that blindness. Those old trees that hung over Broadway made that road less sunny, and people didn't seem as hurried as they are today. I made it across, looking 2 or 3 times, watching out for those folks who type on their smartphones, never realizing it just ain't them. I see the old junior and senior high school, and I remember feeling trapped and crowded in the schools built when families were big and churches cheered for more children. Time has passed as one generation is letting the next pay for its indulgences. And greed and the new kids on the block can't afford to have 6 kids, much less keep the cavernous church heated and maintained, a failed economic model. I felt the deadlines of projects needing doing and angry customers all wrapped inside me. Let it go, I tell myself. The grind of work weighing down my thinking, and no way out of the mess we've created. Do myths crack under the weight of time, or is our ego larger than reality? I wondered as I saw the mass event toiling and heard the tones of Emerson. Most men live lives of quiet desperation, he said, and it seems as if his insights are more true than ever. He passed in 1882, and I wondered if Emerson ever made it to town, because anybody who was anybody made it our way as lumber money spread its influence. Those old lumber barons knew Winona needed arts and distractions to escape the gray winters. Said it was right in the bones. Back then, you couldn't just hop in a jet or a train, much less a car, whose dependability wasn't the best in the not-so-distant past. Those lumber barons invested in education from our grade schools to our institutions of higher learning. They believed in learning, and William H. Laird put down $50,000 for the library that still stands functionally yet today. I sat on the stoop of that library looking at a town that has undergone many changes in its time. I had checked out Herman Hesse's Stories from 5 Decades and sat reading my favorite short story called The City. That story, written in 1910, still rings true today. Summer in Winona. What a great place to live. Cities change as time wields its sword, and have been happening long before Columbus set foot in America. We have a history that existed pre-Columbus, but we've largely swept that under the rug, and not much is taught in our early grade schools about the people who were here before us. So much to learn and so few years to live. America is a new kid on the block of history. There must have been tough times for the people who were here before us to see your culture and ways get stomped on by a new country, a people who blindly saw freedom in their quest. freedom had to have an entirely different meaning to the Native Americans as we caged them in fears of our vision. Those sands of the western states like South Dakota and Oklahoma were void of water, and the air smelled different, tasted different. The desolation of the sands of South Dakota doesn't bring freedom to my thinking. As a city, we had our founding in the 1850s. We started from scratch and tried to establish order in the ways of old Europe, where kings and their military buddies split the bounties. It wasn't easy, and the men with the money hired the judges and lawyers who wrote the rules. William Mitchell of Winona worked tirelessly writing the early laws which provided the base of our governance. And those rules of laws and order were Constitution-based. He did it so well they named a law school after him, the William Mitchell School of Law, located on Summit Avenue in St. Paul. Mr. Mitchell's office was located in the Triers block, where Insty Prints now stands. 2nd Street was the business center of Winona in its early days. Horses, chickens, cows, and people setting foot on the prostitutes. People setting foot on the lands which used to be of the Lakota Nation. Brothels and banks sharing a block with harbor merchants and lawyers tell us our historical roots. Mitchell, a Canadian, was from here from the get-go along with his partner, Daniel Norton. Congressman, along with Harry Galbraith. Mr. Galbraith was the man who decided to let the Indians starve, and along with Andrew Myrick, whose brother Nathan helped found La Crosse, let them do just that in 1862. Myrick was best known for saying, "Let them eat dirt." When Myrick was found dead, his mouth was filled with dirt and sod, and his other crevices were also filled with dirt. Galbraith would die in Wyoming in 1909. Mr. Norton, who I don't think was related to the lumber Nortons, eventually became Minnesota's first senator, while Mr. Mitchell wrote many of the laws which governed early Minnesota. Mitchell's house stood on the corner of Main and Broadway, where Wesley Methodist Church now stands, a short walk to 2nd Street in those days before cars. Mr. Mitchell sat on the boards of directors of many early Winona institutions, taking ownership like some lawyers sometimes do. Winona has always been home to superb lawyers, and that prominence started with Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell's son, William DeWitt Mitchell, educated in Winona, would later become Attorney General in the administration of Herbert Hoover. Pre-1900 was largely void of laws that protected the poor and oppressed. And by 1900, many of our early founders had started calling the cemetery home. Shacks, shanties, and buildings got tore down and were replaced by buildings that reflected newfound wealth. They built monuments to their name, and though the lumber industry left as we knew it, then the deep pockets owned the real estate and the banks, so their prosperity continued. Lumber leaving in the days of Prohibition brought some gloom to the streets of Winona. Lumber leaving made the workers of the lumber plants scramble for ways to survive. And when Prohibition was instituted, we made our own. That sold a lot of locally brewed Coke, as resourcefulness has always had a place in Winona history. So as I sit on these Winona steps, I see history through that abstract of time. I saw trolley cars and an old YMCA which burned down in the day and sat where the Bob Kierland complex stands today. The new Masterpiece Hall replaced the old school auditorium as time carves its way. Winona was nothing like it looks today, a far different memory that isn't easily found in the landscape of town. Today, when Winona has experienced a rebirth downtown, as some of us older folks hold on to Winona's past, only seeing what was or what's gone. The buildings are mostly the same, but the names carrying on inside the buildings have had to change and adapt to a changing world. It was a busy street. It was here that immigrants from faraway Europe got off the boat on the former lands of the Lakota Nation and planted roots that remain today. Many were hungry with only a Sunday change of clothes. So hungry they didn't notice the beautiful bluffs and abundantly stocked river as their stomachs growled to opportunity on every corner. The usual suspects marked swaths of land that they placed their mills and manufacturing operations near the river, so supplies could easily be gotten and distributed. Horses, cows, donkeys, chickens walked Second Street as farmers with their 40 acres began their livestock operations. It wasn't until 1872, when the railroad built a metal structure crossing the river in La Crosse, that Winona boomed as the forests of northern Wisconsin were milled in Winona and built the West. An old man approached me on the steps of that library and saying, "It was a long time ago when I made my fortune. Right place, right time. Land was cheap, and the whole western U.S. was open to building. Small towns from Winona to the Pacific Ocean were built with the lumber from Wisconsin forests. Long days and nights, calculating and recalculating, making every dime count. One of the few things that made me feel good were my children and wife. We used to go fishing every Sunday during the summer, a nice-sized, sturdy boat that lets the kids frolic and learn about Mother Nature. I had a strong attachment to the land of this country. I think that came from growing up in northern Pennsylvania. My kids made me smile. I left Pennsylvania as a young man to make my fortune. Much of my family came with me. Winona's a dark place, cold and merciless, and it was each man for himself in those early dark days. My family felt most at home in this valley, where everybody knew everybody." All yours. Yeah.
This next one isn't very happy. About 10 years ago, while I was still just visiting Winona, I bought a book over at Paperbacks and Pieces called, I don't even remember what the hell it was called. It was written by the historian Mary Nilles, who was a great historian and native of Rolling Stone, Minnesota. It's still in print. Hint, hint. One old picture stood out to me. A young man in his 20s with just the words "Blind Andrew" written beneath him. And what you see up there is basically all I knew about him was that he was a blind news agent and that he got run over by something on his way over to the deposit bank, which happened quite a bit. That's all I knew about him. And then, for reasons best known to Jesus, I got interested in him again. And you're going to have to listen to it. Sorry. Andrew Meyer was born to Franz and Magdalena Meyer in Austria in 1863 or some other year. He came to Winona with his parents in 1867. He was not born blind. He gradually lost his eyesight to a series of fits, apparently. His 5 siblings were all sighted. Now, the state of Minnesota had an institute for the blind and had an institute for the deaf. I'm very familiar with the Minnesota Institute for the Minnesota School for the Deaf because that's where my great-grandparents, Spurgeon, Sturtevant Smith, White, and Rebecca Jane Smith met. and they got married after they graduated from the Minnesota School for the Deaf. However, Andrew's parents kept him at home. Home was 155 Front Street. Not going to bust any sudden moves here, but there you go. This is like an 1867 map, but if you look on Front Street, let me see here. And you see down on the corner of Johnson and Front Street, two little houses on the corner. This is jammed in between the waterworks and an iron foundry. The house farthest from the corner was that of the Meyer family. That's where blind Andrew lived with his mother and father. He had a newsstand at 172 Johnson Street, which would be at the corner of 4th and Johnson, where the History Center Annex is now standing. His whole life was basically walking between his house and his newspaper stand, selling newspapers and whatnot, making his way around as best he could. Nobody seemed to help him a lot. They poked fun at, blind Andrew got knocked over by a team of horses again. Well, he didn't think it was so funny, but he was used to it. There wasn't a whole heck of a lot of institutionalized empathy going around in the 1880s and 1890s. He didn't talk to many people. He didn't ask for help. Now, he didn't go home to, some shabby little room. He lived with his parents. He lived with his support system. It wasn't all terribly bad, but apparently Andrew started hitting the sauce, as people will do, as I've done a couple times in my life. And I don't know for a fact that this happened, but he tried. He tried hard, but he couldn't make it. In 1892 or some other year, there was a festival where local businessmen gave prizes for attendees of the festival. Blind Andrew donated a $5 annual subscription to Harper's Weekly to the prettiest girl. I mean, isn't that sad? Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? He tried. And I can't help but believe he just got to the point where he wasn't getting out of it what he was putting into it. I don't know if he was trying to drink himself to death or what, but something snapped. Well, I'm not going to talk about that. But his mother said after his death that he'd been depressed, but she didn't mention the alcohol. All the other newspapers in the state said he was on a spree. You be the judge. I'm not going to judge. Down at 7090 2nd Street is a business called Pieces of the Past. It's highlighted in puke green on this picture here. You'll notice it. There's a lady painted in the window. And I'm in negotiations to hear what the story on that is. She's a solemn-looking woman painted on the middle window, looking over at the acoustic cafe across the streets. 50 years ago, Pieces of the Past was also a place known as the El Cid Rap Parlor. Anybody remember the El Cid Rap Parlor? I don't know if I wouldn't be raising my hand like that, David. My dear friend Steve Bolin used to wait around watching people take the perp walk down the steps from the El Cid Rap Parlor, which is pretty much what that place has always been. It was operated, the tavern downstairs was operated by Alexander Arts at 79 East 2nd. Upstairs was the realm of Miss Edith Shackle. She and her employees, variously known as sporting women, That's how they were listed in the census, or inmates, as they were called in the newspaper. Well, think about it. They were inmates, all right. They only got out of the house to go to church. A lot of them became voracious readers in their copious spare time. Andrew would make some sales over here. What Blind Andrew would do was, after he was shutting down his newsstand for the evening, before eating his dinner, he would stop at Edith Shackle's room. Nobody talked to him there either, but he'd pull out his flask, have a drink or something like that before he went home. And on May 28th, 1895, he did his usual thing, sat down in his usual open chair, said, "Boy, business is bad." Nobody paid any attention to him until there was a big bang and a thump on the floor. He had shot himself in the chest and died instantly. He's lying in a pool of blood. That's the end of the line for Andrew Meyer. His suicide was reported in both Winona papers the next day. The Minneapolis Tribune got to it next, and their version said, "Blind Andrew Meyer, about 30 years of age, committed suicide in a house of ill repute on 2nd Street in Winona. The man had been on a spree all day, and his final suicide was the result of a spree. He was a news agent." That's it. That's all he got. On a happier note, the Winona Daily Herald had this to say on May 30th, 1895. "Good Samaritans, honor to these generous men. John Gay circulated a subscription among the businessmen of the city yesterday, collecting $40. And P.J. Evans collected the sum of $12 from insurance men as a gift to the mother of Blind Andrew. The casket was given by John Dietz, and the hearse and wagonette by E.G. Nevius, and a hack apiece by Keenan and Rowe and George Mallory." Maybe there were little pockets of kindness and caring and empathy in Winona in those days, but you had to work pretty hard to get it. It would seem that Blind Andrew, the news agent, faded from memory rather quickly. Sentimentality was not a big thing on the streets of frontier Winona, but those were different times. I'm overjoyed that I caught that small picture in the corner of a book I bought at Paperbacks and Pieces back in 2015, when I was a 4-alarm flaming alcoholic. I didn't pull the plug like Blind Andrew did. I celebrate 7 years sober in July. And here I am. Thanks. But here I am sharing the life of Blind Andrew Meyer and of Edith Shackle, too, in this lovely building in 2025. Thanks for putting up with me. Take it away.
Take it away.
All yours. You got the floor.
So I'm sitting on the library steps, talking to this old guy. He was James Norton. Oh, Laird Norton. Everybody knows about Matthew Norton.
Are you on?
Oh.
Now you're on.
No.
Turn it on again. There you go.
You wouldn't think that should be so hard, would you? I'm just the easiest things in the world. So I was talking to James Norton on the stoop, and he proceeded to tell me a little bit about the Laird Norton Company that I didn't know. He was an old man when I met him on the stoop of the Winona Public Library. It was early in the morning, and the air felt and smelled fresh. The breeze of downtown carried the scent of warm bread, baked at the Federal Bakery just a few blocks away, and I felt myself growing hungry. The old guide told me he died in 1907, and that his home was where Central Lutheran now stands. Came here in 1856 with his brother Matthew and cousin William. We lived in small houses on 2nd Street as we tried to build our business. The Civil and Dakota Wars made it tough to expand, and some lumber mills closed as the road was anything but smooth. I made more money than any man or family deserved. My children would not want, nor my grandchildren. But as much as I made, I couldn't escape the pain that life brought me. I started losing my sight in the 1860s, and in the 1880s I had one of my eyes removed. By the 1890s, my good eye had failed, and the rest of my life was spent living in gloom and darkness. I had it easy compared to my brother Matthew. As you well know, he lost 2 sons and had to walk with the shell of his youngest daughter as she dealt with those deaths. I never felt Matthew smile again. A real tragedy, as Beulah at a young age lit up a room. Us old money men needed that jolt. Matthew's grandson, Norton Clapp, became president of Weyerhaeuser, another lumber concern Laird Norton was part of. He was president of the Boy Scouts and built a Space Needle in Seattle. He lost a couple of wives and a son, ended up marrying his daughter-in-law. I bet the money people talked. I was getting in my buggy just outside of the Huff Hotel, he said. It by then was old, dusty, and just creaking along. But it was a place I could go where everybody knew me. I could find my way to the bar blindfolded, as long as nothing got changed. And that's comforting to a man who's blind. Anyway, I was leaving the Huff House one fine morning after coffee. Got into my buggy when I heard screaming come from the back of Colonel Cockrell's house, there on 4th and Johnson. Not a block away from our sitting spot, Hanson. I smelled the burning skirt and the human flesh, and I saw a shadow running I couldn't really see. Thomas, my driver, said Lena Weinberg was on fire. It was the talk of the town, though the newspaper was hush-hush. If this had happened at any other saloon or establishment or location, it would have been on the front page. New York, Boston, and Chicago. Everybody knew Lena, and we swept her dying under the rug. We felt certain the order to kill had come from one of the big houses. We should have known better than to build our town on a cemetery. Native American mounds and burial grounds all over this town. The greed of gold made us lose our minds, thinking we were invincible. The spirit has a way of talking. One of the last persons I hired was my nurse, who helped me my last few days of living. A delightful lady who we won't name. After my passing, she began taking care of my son William, who had vision problems from the beginning, and in 1937 she was also taking care of my daughter. The houses were connected, and we hired another nurse to take care of our needs. Well, the old nurse, who was a fine, fine lady, had gotten herself a revolver, walked into the family room, the family home, fired a couple shots at the younger nurse. 1937. Judge Libra had her declared insane. Money can buy you a lot of things, Hanson, but happiness isn't one of them. And I remember reading this story. I thought I knew everything about Laird Norton. And then I found in 1937 that this happened, right in the heart. And it must have been a magnificent mansion, because I'd read about weddings and stuff that they had for the family there, and the elaborate cars that came, and these people had it all. And I think yet today, if you read the Laird Norton website, the money still takes care of 273 families. That's some serious dough. And they're serious. They own banks still, and they have lumber interests. These folks are smart. They planned. They planned everything they did. They didn't have telephones. They didn't have radio. Radio came in the 30s, 20s.
Late 1890s.
Oh, it did? Oh. Well, then maybe we had radio here in town. But it was hard to get the news, you know. Everybody read newspapers. Everybody. And they'd come down here to this wonderful library because it was free. And, you know, Winona people, they like their dollars. They hold on to those dollars. And here they can get free newspapers. And they can get free magazines. And they could get free books. And I remember when they used to have that in a house on, it's on 5th and Huff, the Lori Lucas house. They had that library in there. And that may have started with either the Lucas family or the Laird family or the Norton family. I mean, they were all cousins. The town was owned by cousins. But no matter what they did, no matter how much money they had, tragedy just kicked them in the teeth. Just kicked them in the teeth. Norton Clap out in Seattle had all sorts of problems. People dying. But they're still around. They're still around. Now I'm going to read a story next about John Latch. This is an old story. And we got Mary Farrell here, so if I get a little screwed up, because trust me, when I'm writing fiction, I get a little screwed up. Hi. And so I wrote this story probably 10, 12 years ago. I hadn't thought about it for a long time. But it's the story of John Latch. And John Latch donated. Philanthropy has long been part of Winona and Winona's history. The deep pockets who got it, and they worked hard for it, when their time came, they built libraries. They invested in universities and colleges. They invested in the people of the town because they believed in Winona. They knew where their fortune was made. Those Polish people down in the East End that built the lumber companies up and worked hours upon hours upon hours for pennies, for $1 a week.
No, it was $1 a day.
Oh, $1 a day. Man, you know, that's still pretty frugal, right?
Yeah.
And they built that big church down there in the East End. I mean, my dad, he'd sometimes kind of laugh at those old Polish guys down in the East End. Well, I tell you, Dad was wrong about a lot of things. Me and him butted heads a lot. Those people worked down there in the East End. They raised themselves up, grit, and it's pretty impressive. When you look at the big companies in Winona, you look at how many are Polish ancestry and Polish people are running the companies. They understood the value of a dollar. They understood resourcefulness. And there's one word I could describe Winona. It's we're resourceful. And that's a powerful word. But anyway, John Latch. We hear about him, but we don't really know him. This is his story. The land was where I grew up. Chores didn't take care of themselves, but my pappy urged me to walk the bluffs and bottoms. He would sometimes walk with me, and his long stride made me run to keep up. He would find a stone to sit upon, and we would watch the world open up with its secrets. My mind would relax knowing it was here where I felt safe. We could feel the tension leaving our souls, and we felt so much better after a walk and a sitting. I will always remember those wise old eyes that brought gentle comfort when things were tough. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. You had to hear the inflection in his voice and see the twinkle in his eye to understand what he was really saying. That was how he talked. We used to feel serene back home, and my thoughts made the most sense out where it was quiet. Just hearing a woodpecker peck or leaves rustle made me leave the headaches behind and open my eyes to a better way of doing things. Poppy and I were closest when we were in the river bottoms. You could smell and feel life happening down here. It was the unknowing sounds and those musty smells of life changing that brought my mind into focus. I breathe happily when I think of all the time we spent there. Something came over Poppy when he got in the river bottoms. His mind would start to ask questions, and he would sometimes blurt out what he was thinking. He would shake his head and mumble something about how it never ceased to amaze him. I wish he would have explained more about those thoughts before he left. We would never want to leave that land of river bottoms and woods and bluffs. Our food came from the land we loved. It was there I started eating the nuts and berries. We caught our fish and cooked them in any way that gave us variety. We ate the mushrooms, and Mammy said they tasted as fine as the ones from back home. I was a young man and could have imagined a better place to grow up. You could see the animals and the trees and the leaves and watch the seasons pass. I could still taste those nuts and grasses and mushrooms Mommy used to cook. They bring a smile to my face yet today. I ate very little, but I was never hungry or driven by that hunger. Those foods would fill my belly and dull my mind, so I simply stopped eating the foods of the times. I had money, but the foods I liked best were off the branch and inside a shell, and often free for the picking. We ate some meat, but as I aged, I ate less and less of that meat. I couldn't understand these many-course meals and these large helpings that accompanied them. I stuck to myself and lived simply and humbly. Mammy would pluck the grasses and wildflowers of the prairie, and we started and ended our days with a simple cup of tea. The gentle tingling the tea gave to my body was sometimes the best part of my day, and I still feel that tingling of tea as I rested here on my deathbed. I saw many things as the final curtain closed, and for now I will keep those to myself. I could breathe well outside. The quiet of the backwaters and the silence of the money tree was where I felt most alive. The croak of a frog breaking my train of thought as I tried to get the worries of work out of my mind was nature rendering medicine. I can still remember that sound of the river lapping the canoe and shore, the sounds of the old frying pan as it sizzled the walleye, and the smell of the day's catches that filled my lungs and brought me home. It wasn't Mammy's, but it was the best cooked food I ever had. My Indian friends would visit, and we would share their tobacco and my tea out on the river. We would pass the pipe, and the visions of a past gone era became part of who we were. They told stories of long ago, dead legends and big fish and great bears who sacrificed their life so people could eat. Then they talked of their ancestors, and at times I thought I saw the faces of the past in the flames of the campfire. I took a deep breath. My heart began to feel the past, and my mind began to see life in a different way. It was my first vision. I looked around and saw the world as I knew it. I heard the trains and saw the steamboats and knew this way of life was ending. The sad eyes of my Indian friends saw tomorrow and realized progress was going to trample the life they knew. The life which was dear to me was ending as I knew it. The trees from Wisconsin were being milled in the lumber yards of Winona, and used to build all points west would take many years to recover. As I sat on the island, I knew I had to preserve those memories and visions of life so the children I never had could remember life as it was. And I think the thing about John Latch's father is he served in the Civil War, and he came back with a crippled arm, and I think that they never John and his sister and his brother Eddie never had children. So the Latch line kind of died. Now, Mary might know a little bit more about John Latch than I do, and their home farm was over near Dodge,
Yeah, Hungry Valley.
Hungry Valley over near Dodge. And their home in Winona was on Raspberry Square, over by St. Martin's, that park across the street. It doesn't look much like the Latch house anymore. It's kind of been apartmented up, and it doesn't look the best. But we come from a lot of really remarkable people. Winona's filled with remarkable people from yesterday and today, living, walking people. That's all I got, Joe.
All right, well, thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions?
Any
or
questions?
comments or complaints or anything?
Which we planted years ago. Do you ever do a story on that?
I don't, but I can.
I did.
There, because Dad, I always think that pickup load of shives, which are the roundup stems of the flaxseed. They use the flax for stuff, I don't know what, but they use that, the stems, ground up for bedding, and it was free. And then once in a while, they would send it on site. Well, anyway, you guys do a story on it if you get a chance.
Well, I remember I posted a picture several times to Facebook, something I colorized using Photoshop, and it provokes comments usually from people whose dads worked at the Swift plant. They comment about how, you know, it closed down completely out of the blue in the mid-1960s. It was just corporate decided we don't need the Winona plant anymore. So they also remembered the day, one day a year, the kids would come to the Swift plant to come and see what their dad did for a living. And they remembered that very vividly. And they would always just say, like, it wasn't anything gross. I just understood how much my dad loved us, that he would work at a job like that for all those years. There is a story in there. There's a lot of stories in there. There's a lot of stuff that gets just swept under the rug, Gail.
So people might have stories they can add to your story.
That's what I'm shooting for. That's all I've ever asked for.
I never knew how Shive Road acquired its name, so thank you. And I did write a story about Shive Road once. And yeah, I had one of the Mankato Bar guys, catch fish in that Shive Creek. And and you know, I don't think it was the healthiest fish to eat.
No, I'm not from here, and I wouldn't eat fish that you caught there. I go there to watch trains.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or any other complaints? Again, thanks for coming.
And we're gonna start showing up at Peter's Beer Garden at 6:00 on the first Thursday of every month. Start at 6. Start a little bit later.
As much as I love talking here, it is kind of like the backbone of anything I'm trying to do here. I like talking at Peter's because you can talk about stuff and say words you can't really say in the library when it's going straight to YouTube. If you know what I mean. And we'd love to see you there. Thanks again. All right.
Oh, and we'll also be holding a towny night of questions down at Two Fathoms Brewing